Welcome to Sharp Football Analysis. Today, Rich and I will discuss the Giants starting Jaxson Dart, some young running backs looking at bigger workloads, and preview the most interesting games of Week 4. So make sure you stick around. Welcome to Sharp Football Analysis. Rich and I are here to get you ready for Week 4 of the fantasy football season. But before we do that, I do want to tell you about a great offer. It's time for our annual points promo. It's simple. The amount of combined points scored in Thursday night's game between the Cardinals and Seahawks will be the percentage we give off on every Sharp Football product. After the game, promo code POINTS, POINTS, will give you the percentage equal to the total number of points scored. So if there's 50 points scored, you'll get 50% off. Go to sharp.football, pick the package that's right for you, and save big with promo code POINTS on all of our products. All right, let's get to it. How you doing, Rich?
Doing good. We're almost 1 month down. The first month, it always comes and goes so fast, and we're in still kind of like the collection phase of the NFL. But then you're in your fantasy leagues, and you're like, oh, it's a quarter of the fantasy regular season now. So wins matter still as we're collecting this information. We're always trying to adjust, and it's been an interesting start here. We had one really bad week of offense to start the year. It looked like, all right, well, maybe that was just week 4 of the preseason, and week 2 offenses were good. And then last year they stunk again. So, or last week, sorry, they stunk again. So we're hopefully week 4 is we're just going to continue the roller coaster ride, and that means it'll be a good week, I guess.
Yeah, it's kind of where we are. Although I look at this slate of games, and it was difficult. We always try to preview 3 games on this episode of Sharp Football Analysis, and I said, all right, well, what 3 games are we going to pick? And it was difficult to choose 3 of them. And I know as you're working through the worksheet previews, which, by the way, if you want access to Rich's preview of every single game this week, take advantage of that points offer. They're all available as part of the Sharp Fantasy Package, so go check that out. But as you're going through them, there were some of the games you sometimes provide commentary on a few of the games in the email, and some of the games are just disgusted by what we're
Titans Texans was a heartbreaker when I got to that one.
Yeah, it might be rough. That game might be a little bit rough. We'll have to see. This is a good time for the Texans offense to come out of the lull that they're in. We'll see what happens there. But that actually leads me into kind of what I wanted to talk about here at the beginning, which is how we're handling information this early in the season. Like you said, we're only 3 games in for these teams, right? Like we're only these 3 games in. And I often I try to keep in mind that if something were to happen, even over a 2-game stretch in the middle of the season, how would I react to that? Because you have to take, I think, into account weeks 1, 2, and 3 a little bit more, because we don't know. We don't have that pre-existing information. So it is a little bit more important, I think, but also trying not to overreact to it, right? And trying not to overreact to what we're seeing. So how do you, especially as you're writing something like the worksheet, which is so dependent on like evidence-based, what have we seen? How do you kind of try to differentiate between what's real and what do we need to really put stock in, and what maybe are we still waiting to see how it unfolds?
Just try to apply as much context as possible to what we've seen so far, right? A lot of especially like these defensive stats, I've always been someone that has talked about for years that, a lot of defensive stats in the NFL are really just offensive stats, based on who you've played. So I definitely try to apply like a lot of context to like, hey, this is what this team has done, and this is who they faced, and this is what these opponents have done against other teams, right? Like you're trying to marriage all those things. Because like you said, if it's week 10 and we have a 2-game sample of something happening, that's still only 20% of the sample. And like, we can say, all right, well, like we can apply this other 80% to what happened here too. Right now, 1-game sample is 1/3 of the sample, 2 games is 2/3, and 3 games is still 100% of the sample size that we have. So we're just trying to apply as much context as possible and take things as they come and try to adjust and be as fluid as possible. But it's always fun to think about like 3 weeks into, like if we drafted over, kind of where we would be. I love doing like those kinds of things because it would be completely flipped on its head. And that's always fun to see the dynamic of that, especially when we talk about these trades, because I'll get a lot of trade offers or trade questions on like Twitter, or someone will ask me in the chat on Sunday about a trade and be like, well, this guy was valued here and this guy was valued here pre-draft. And it's like, man, none of that matters right now. So you've got to kind of throw a lot of that out the window. And we're operating now in season football is the one sport too out of all of them, because the sample size is so small inherently for the season, just being 17 games, and your fantasy season 16 games, and the regular season,
even shorter.
14 games, even, where some stuff doesn't course correct. And a lot of people look at fantasy football still just such backwards to predict what's going to happen in a week, where the biggest edges still come. And, from playing DFS is kind of being able to get ahead of the field, like we were with like Rome Odunze in week 2, like being ahead of Rome. And then you come back in week 3 and like, he's the most popular player on the slate. So we're trying to call out some of those situations. We got a couple right again last week, being ahead of like, with AJ Brown, although for half of football, Kevin Patullo refused to still, we'll see what the Eagles do. And I'm very curious to see how the Eagles operate in this game this week. But, like Nico Collins getting off of that flop lag. See if we can whisper into the ear of a few other guys, like maybe Lad McConkey this week. Maybe it's a Lad week finally. So it's just, like I said, just applying as much context as possible to things.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the Eagles. That's one of the games we'll definitely cover with Eagles and Bucs, and so we'll get to them for sure. I'm glad you brought up Lad McConkey, because it's kind of like two differing situations here. The first is the Chargers pass rate, which we had concerns heading into the year. Would this be like the pass rate we saw at the end of last year, or because of the changes they made in the offseason, would we see them like revert more to what you would normally expect from a Greg Roman offense? And the fact that it's been super pass heavy these first 3 weeks, we can put a lot of stock into that, because we also saw it at the end of last season, even though it wasn't to this degree, right? We also saw it at the end of last season. Whereas Lad McConkey is a little bit different, because we're still trying to work out like what are we seeing here. And I thought your point about Quentin Johnston and the fact that he was still able to do that and command those targets against Denver, and kind of the setup that Denver has on defense, like that's a really strong signal for him, because that matchup was not set up for him at all. That matchup was definitely much better set up for McConkey than it was for Johnston. Johnston still goes out there and does it. And then you really start to think. Like I was considering a trade for Lad McConkey in a league this week, and I am like, I came out of the first 2 weeks like, nah, I think it's probably going to be fine. Coming out of that Denver game, I am more into the I don't know kind of situation, and it is, like you said, all about that context of what we saw at least against Denver.
Yeah, I mean, for one, Quentin Johnston, week 1, when I wrote him up in week 2, because he had the monster week 1, and everyone's like, oh, is this just going to be like Isaiah Likely like last year? And I came out actually more bullish. I was like, this is now proof of concept. The Chargers, like, they want to be a passing team. This is a player that's in year 3, got better in year 2 as a first-round draft pick, has like the archetypical physical profile we would look for. He has some faults as a player too, but I was just like, you know what, this is a player we probably just want to play and ride the highs and lows. Like, yeah, he'll probably have some volatility. And then, he comes back in week 2. He catches another 60-yard touchdown. And then, all right, it's like, all right, week 3, all right, maybe this is the firewall spot. He's playing the Broncos. They've been good against outside receivers now for multiple years. They got Surtain. And, there was no fear. Like, they were going at Patrick Surtain in that game because, again, he's big and fast. Like, this is a big, fast human being. He's putting it together, and we should just stock that, right? And be a little bit more bullish on the signal for Quentin Johnston. I do believe, though, that Quentin Johnston, being as good as he's been to start the year, eventually will be good for Lad McConkey in a sense, because teams are now going to have to start to respect this, right? Like, teams are going to have to actually game plan around Quentin Johnston now, which I don't believe has necessarily been the case these first 3 weeks. And that will start opening some things up for Lad McConkey as well. So Quentin Johnston actually could turn out to be a positive for McConkey. We were always kind of below the market on McConkey a little bit because he wasn't like a high target earner in context of his offense last year. And so he was being drafted against all these other players that like were easily projectable to say, like, this guy's gonna have 25% of targets, upwards to 30% of the team targets. Like, McConkey was never in that bucket yet. He was never operating in that space. So we were always like a little bit below. Then they added Keenan Allen. And it was just like, man, all right, he fell. And I was like, all right. So I started grabbing some more at like the 2-3 turn where he was going, where I kind of thought he should have been valued at. And then like this year, we've seen he's just been below even like kind of those rates. I do think that there is going to be some oscillation there, especially with Keenan Allen, right? Like, Keenan Allen, as much as the story's been good and it's not washed, Keenan Allen is he's masking a little bit this with the touchdown deodorant right now. Like, has not been over 70 yards in any game yet. He's got a touchdown in every game. He would be one guy I would say would be like potentially on like the sell high list, or a guy that you package in like these 2-for-1s and you're trying to get players from. Not that he's going to turn into a zero, but he's definitely making the most of his opportunity right now, I believe, while Ladd's been kind of underperforming his. And we're going to see probably that kind of flip at some point.
And to your point, though, that the Ladd McConkey is not going to probably have that touchdown deodorant, which is the problem. And so like we're not going to get that from Ladd. So even if we run into like a run of 70-yard games, it might just be 70-yard games. And so that's definitely the concern with him moving forward. But the other thing we know about Ladd McConkey is that he's good and he's efficient when he gets targets. And if you have a good receiver who's efficient when he gets targets, who has a good quarterback throwing the ball in an offense that wants to pass, oftentimes that works out. And so that's why I'm not completely losing my mind about
That's
this.
a good point though about the format setting, because this is now a multi-year sample. And we've seen this. Zay Flowers is the same way.
Yeah.
And Puka Nacua, oddly, is very much in the same vein too, where these guys are just not really, they don't have they're not first read targets. They don't have plays called for them in the red zone, in the end zone. So if you are in like a full PPR league, like Ladd could potentially be a buy low guy. But if you're in a half-point PPR or a non-PPR format, like he's probably not a player you really want to be aggressive in targeting.
All right, we're going to do our agree and disagree segment in just a second. But before we do that, I do want to bring in Warren Sharp to talk about the Sharp Football PrizePicks lineup for Week 4.
It's time for us to build this week's PrizePicks lineup and turn $100 into $600. PrizePicks is the best place to win cash while watching sports with their easy-to-use app. And now you can play $5 and get $50 instantly in lineups when you use code Warren after you download their app. All right, guys, last week we turned $100 into $600. If you were following us on X, you saw me post the card and the lineup that week. Don't forget, PrizePicks is available in 40 states, including California and Texas, and they'll give you $50 in lineups when you play your first $5 lineup. Plus, they've got another layup to use this week. We used the Mahomes layup last week. We got another one to show you momentarily. So all we have to do is come up with 2 selections that we really like, because this layup is going to be used as another selection. We're going to turn $100 into $600. If you didn't get involved with us last week, the time to do it is right now. So let's begin here. The first up, I like Amon-Ra St. Brown more than 67.5 receiving yards. Why is that? Well, it's simple. St. Brown has been targeted on 42% of his routes against man coverage, with a 4.6 yards per route run, compared to against zone coverage, 1.7 yards per route run, and only a 19% target rate. What do the Cleveland Browns do? They play a lot of man coverage, and they also blitz. And that's going to lead to more Amon-Ra St. Brown targets. Against the blitz, St. Brown has been targeted a team high 36% of the targets. The other thing that's going for us here is that the Cleveland Browns run defense is elite, absolutely elite. This run defense has faced Derrick Henry, Josh Jacobs, and Chase Brown, and they have allowed minus 0.12 yards before contact per rush. The NFL average is 1.18 yards before contact. They're contacting running backs on the negative side of the line of scrimmage. They're getting into the backfield with frequency, limiting running back rushes. And therefore, even though you've got Jahmyr Gibbs, even though you've got David Montgomery, the Detroit Lions might be leaning more into the passing game here because it's the easier way to move the football. So Amon-Ra more than 67.5 is the first selection. Next up, we've got Matthew Golden going up against the Dallas Cowboys on Sunday Night Football. And my logic for this one, I absolutely love, and I think you will as well. Let's talk about it. We're going Matthew Golden more than 21.5 for his longest reception. Why is that? Listen to this. The Cowboys have played 3 games so far this year. I don't want you to guess how many guys have catches of 20 plus yards. I don't want you to even guess how many guys have catches of 25 plus yards. Hell, I don't even want you to guess how many guys have catches of 30 plus yards. What I'm going to ask you is guess how many players against the Cowboys have catches of 35 plus yards in their 3 games. The answer is 6. They have allowed 6 receptions of 35 plus yards in just 3 games. Rome Odunze and Luther Burden did it last week. The week before that, they played the New York Giants. Every single wide receiver that had at least 1 catch also had a catch of at least 48 yards against this Dallas Cowboys pass defense. There was 3 of them. Neighbors, Slayton, and Wan'Dale Robinson. And then against the Philadelphia Eagles in week 1, who hardly passed the football at all, they still allowed a deep reception to Jahan Dotson. So last week, the Dallas Cowboys played and gave up a ton of receptions of this depth to the Chicago Bears outdoors. Now the game is being played indoors. Last week, the Green Bay Packers were outdoors on the road in Cleveland. Versus a brutal Browns defense, Golden still had a 34-yard reception. The prior week, when he wasn't starting, now he is because of injuries, he wasn't starting in week 2, he still had 2 targets. And those targets, one was 33 air yards and one was 48 air yards. So they are trying to get him the ball down the field. Golden's obviously from Texas, played at the University of Texas, going back home to play a game against the Dallas Cowboys, playing indoors against the Cowboys defense that was just torn up by Caleb Williams. And he leads the team over the last 2 weeks in targets of 20 plus yards. So I like him to have a longest reception of more than 21.5 yards. For our third selection, we're going with the layup. We don't have to overthink this one. I didn't overthink the Mahomes one last week. Guys, they're just giving this to you. They're allowing you to have a $100 lineup turn it into $600. And this one can be one of those selections that you use. It's simple. Jalen Hurts to have more than a half a passing yard. I'm not even going to analyze it. Stick it in your card, use it in your lineup, and help turn $100 into $600. Keep in mind, PrizePicks will allow you to play in California and Texas. Let's review our lineup where we're going to try to turn $100 into $600. We're already playing with house money. We won last week. We turned $100 into $600. We're trying to do it for a second week in a row. Here's the 3 selections that we like and that we're going with. Jalen Hurts, more than half a passing yard. Amon-Ra St. Brown, more than 67.5 receiving yards. Matthew Golden, more than 21.5 on his longest reception. Let's do it again. 100 into 600.
And we're back. All right, let's get ready for agree and disagree, agree or disagree. Sometimes it's agree to disagree, as we have learned throughout this process. The idea is that I throw out a statement, Rich either has to agree or disagree. First up for week 4, I think probably the biggest just general news story, NFL news story of week 4, and that is Jaxson Dart getting the starting job. And so my statement here for you to agree or disagree with is Jaxson Dart will be a factor in 1 quarterback leagues this season.
Yeah, I agree. I believe he will be. I mean, he's the kind of quarterback that we look for in fantasy football, that he's got some passing acumen. He's got really good passing metrics coming out of, college. He performed well under pressure. He was the number 1 passer under pressure in this draft class, even though he had some things, kind of designed for him by Lane Kiffin in, the RPO game and the play action game. But we kind of saw him in the preseason. It's the preseason, we're not going to go crazy and say like he's going to roll over that type of efficiency. But this is a guy that has.
Don't throw we out there. I might go crazy, but that's.
But this is what I'm saying is this guy has a foundation of being a good passer, and then he's a good athlete. Like, so I've used the comp a few times, like Drake May. Like, he's very Drake May-ish in terms of he's not like a full edge. Like, he's not going to run around like Jaden Daniels, right? But like, he is going to give you scrambles, and he'll take off under pressure, right? Like, we saw him run a little bit in the preseason. He had a rushing touchdown. He scrambled on 20% of his dropbacks in college when he was pressured. That was second highest rate in this draft class as well. So I do think we're going to get some Drake May type run out. And even a lot of people probably look at this matchup and they're like, well, it's the Chargers, right? Like this isn't exciting at any level. But even Drake May, his first start last year came in a spot where no one wanted him to play against the Texans, and they got boat raced. They lost 41-21, I believe. And he still had 20 fantasy points in that game. So his spot's actually a little bit better than Drake May's too, not for this week, but in total in the season, because, Drake May had no pass catchers last year. Yeah. He at least still has Malik Neighbors, and shoot, Wan'Dale Robinson is probably better than Demario Douglas. So it's a little bit better of a lift off for Jaxson Dart. The schedule is not very good, but he is, from an archetypical stance, the type of quarterback that will provide some value for sure.
Yeah, I was going to bring up the schedule because I am big on Jaxson Dart. I drafted Jaxson Dart. You and I together drafted Jaxson Dart a lot late in best ball leagues. We expected him to start early. And like you said, it just like all with Jaxson Dart, all you have to think about is the way they've used him in these first few weeks, like bringing him in on those read option and RPO situations. He's going to be a threat. He's going to get designed runs. And I think Drake May is really a good comp for him. He's also going to throw down the field, I would expect, if anything's going to, stick around from from his college production. You mentioned the schedule. The schedule is not great. He does get the Saints next week, which, we'll probably be pretty excited in that situation, especially if he face plants against the Chargers, and we can maybe get a less excited people about Jaxson Dart against the Saints. Then he gets the Eagles, the Broncos, the Eagles again, the 49ers, it is. He does get the Bears after that. Then we get the Packers, Lions. Like it's not great. He gets Minnesota in the fantasy playoffs. So you're definitely going to have to pick and choose kind of where you are with Jaxson Dart for sure. But I do think, like you said, I think, in 2 quarterback leagues, I have him in a 2 quarterback league, and I'm very, very excited about that. I was not like looking forward to starting Trevor Lawrence or Sam Darnold the rest of the year. And so I'm very excited to
I mean, he's going to jump like that, like pocket of like QB2 types that like, you're like, all right, I could stream these guys if they have like a really favorable matchup, but you're not excited to play them like on any level. He's going to jump those guys because of just the rushing ability.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're not going to believe this, but people are not that interested in trading for what Trevor Lawrence or Sam Darnold from me. It's a really
even in
shocking,
2 QB leagues.
Even in 2 QB, it's a shocking development. I know. All right, let's move on to our second agree or disagree, and that is the door is open for TreVeyon Henderson to become the clear lead back in New England.
Oh yeah, I agree with this. Like this is like what we kind of needed. And we've had the rug pulled on us a couple times with TreVeyon, but this one might finally be the curtain call for, Ramondre to give up a backseat to him. So we saw Ramondre open the game. He had a fumble on the opening drive of the game. Then the second drive, it's like, all right, I remember when the fumble happened, because remember the week before, to provide extra context, the week before, TreVeyon Henderson got doghoused because he had 3 holding penalties and gave up a pressure and got kind of benched in the second half of that game. And then I was like, all right, let's see what they do after this fumble. Like this is a direct turnover. And Antonio Gibson comes in the first time. Like, oh, Jesus. Like, like, all right, Antonio Gibson's the first guy.
I don't want to interrupt you, but the Gibson stuff, the Ramondre stuff is what it is. But the Gibson stuff has been like, that's been the tilting part of it.
And I love Gibson as a player because like he's been kind of good anytime he's really gotten opportunities. Yeah. And somehow everyone's like, I don't really like that. Then he gets kind of just roadblocked again. So he comes in the game and I'm like, all right, okay, all right, here we go. And then, they still mix Stevenson back in. They give him a shot because maybe it's, hey, just variance. Hey, the dude fumbled. Let's see if it's a thing. Because, they weren't part of it. Remember, it's a whole new regime than last year. So they were not a part of the fumbling experience of Ramondre last year. I'm sure they're well aware of it, but Gibson then, kind of mixes in with Henderson, mixes in with Stevenson, and Stevenson kind of 1-2 with him this way. Then the first 2 snaps of the second half, he gets that goal line carry, fumbles directly on the goal line, costs them direct points. He only played 5 snaps the rest of the game without a touch. Gibson then took over the very next possession again because it's like, all right, are they going to bring in Henderson? And then he fumbles. So now I think it's just like they were like, we're at the end of our wits here. And then Henderson basically took over the entire fourth quarter. He played 14 snaps compared to 3 for Stevenson and 2 for Gibson. We've seen some of the reports where he was like first in line for reps. Yeah. So we'll see how sticky that is. Coming into this matchup, but Stevenson's now fumbled after fumbling 7 times this year. Still an issue, especially when you give away the goal line touches. Like those are precious commodities. Like you don't want to be doing that. And then Henderson's ball security was the reason they drafted him and why this marriage made sense. Henderson didn't fumble 1 time in college. So hopefully we see Henderson get kind of this runway. It's also a very good spot if we do it. I think, yes, because once Henderson has the role, you can't put it back in the bottle. And that's why from a DFS stance, this is important of just being even if he doesn't hit, playing him this week matters because once Henderson hits, there's no going back. So you want to be ahead of it, like we talked about with Rome. So I think you do need to operate from a DFS angle, especially in large field stuff, on the bullish front. And if he doesn't, and it's still a split in a committee, so what? You lost money, big deal. You probably weren't going to win it anyways. But if you hit, then it matters because you got them at home as a 5-point favorite against this Carolina defense, which is still a run funnel. Carolina's sneakily been pretty good against quarterbacks. They haven't faced the greatest schedule yet either. Again, we're trying to provide context here, but they haven't given up points to receivers and they haven't given up points to quarterbacks yet. It's been all tight ends and running backs. So this would be a good spot too if Henderson has that workload to maybe turn it into a high upside game as well.
Yeah, no, I will definitely be above the field on Henderson this week from that perspective. And I think just from a pure logical way of thinking about this. If you're worried about the rookie, like I need to start these veterans because I need them to be, they're reliable and all of that, and then they put the ball on the ground a combined 3 times, then like you're like, all right, well, that's the end of that argument. Like I should just play the explosive young player. And I don't think Henderson is never, at least in my opinion, never profiled as a guy that's going to go out there and get like 25 carries, right? Like that's not, I don't think, what we're going to see from him. But even if we can get him out there for 12 to 15 with the explosive as we know he can be, as explosive as we saw him in the preseason, right? Then you're talking about a real player, especially if we get him more involved in the passing game. That's obviously something we're looking for sure for him. And like you said, the door is open now. If this isn't the time, like when are we doing it?
But we saw some of the panic get alleviated, obviously, with Amari and Hampton, and unfortunate injury to Najee Harris. But just some of the rookie, remember, they start to come around. We talk about this all the time. Like these guys, we saw Luther Burden get involved a little bit, right? Like these rookies are usually slow builds. So Henderson definitely has like the runway that you're looking for right now to maybe have a little liftoff moment.
I will tell you, I don't know about RJ Harvey, though. He needs J.K. Dobbins to mess up in front of him, because that one, the concerns I had coming into the year about RJ Harvey are unfortunately coming to bear. But as we have now seen, like you said, with many rookies, those things can quickly change. The thing we also need to quickly change in terms of rookies is that the Raiders should learn how to run block. That would be very ideal for us moving forward. But let's get to our last agree or disagree here. And I hesitate to talk about this because it is the Thursday night game. We record this on Thursday morning. We have not seen the results of the Thursday night game. Some people do listen to this on Friday. So just know that if you're listening to this on Friday. But I think we had to talk about Trey Benson because he's such a big story. And this also gives me the opportunity to use the phrase league winner, which Rich hates. And so I really enjoyed that. So agree or disagree that Trey Benson is going to be a league winner this year?
Oh yeah, definitely. The way it's phrased, I big disagree. Like he's not on his own. He is not winning. Like he is not winning leagues.
I had to hit you with a disagree. I knew there were going to be a lot of agrees. I had to get a disagree in there for you.
Yeah, I will say though, like in context of like now rosters that will get to start Trey Benson, he fortifies, I believe, a lot of rosters.
Yep.
Like the way I like to build, and I know you like to build teams too, historically, is, you might throw just a gaggle of guys at like an RB2 spot, right? And you're drafting wide receiver heavy. You're trying to get star power there. You're trying to avoid like the dead zone or like those boring backs that we've already seen kind of be lackluster to open the year, right? Like the Chuba Hubbards of the world, or maybe, like Alvin Kamara, right? Like these guys are just very uninspiring. They're guys that you can throw out and they'll give you some points, but the receivers in that area were still just better draft selections at that point of the draft. So Benson now, for a lot of rosters that structurally built their teams that way, now have a guy that they can rely on every week in terms of getting snaps, touches, and opportunities at a discounted price. It makes those roster builds better and fortifies those teams. So those teams probably look better for lifting off. So he's not going to win them by himself, but he does definitely help those roster builds. In just talking about Benson and his situation in general, some things to talk about here. The Arizona Cardinals are way more pass heavy than anyone realizes. One, they played 2 kind of games where they just kind of controlled weeks 1 and 2, but they're second in the NFL in neutral dropback rate. They can't run block. They're 28th in PFF and run blocking grade. We've talked about a little bit about Clayton Adams, the departure of Clayton Adams, and how the Dallas run game has looked. The Dallas run game has been a lot more functional than anyone believed it would look. It looks like Clayton Adams, when you kind of marry those 2 things, and now I know that that's low-hanging fruit and there's more to it than that. Ball knowers will have, some takes, but it definitely feels like he's been a big loss for this Arizona run game. Also, Trey Benson is just not as consistent of a runner as James Conner. He will give you more explosive than James Conner, but he's going to run into a lot more strikeouts as well. So we have an offensive line that's not blocking, a runner that is more boom or bust as well. And we've got a team that's also throwing the ball at a higher degree than anyone's noticing. I don't think that he's going to have like this extreme run out. He's going to fall into that volume-based RB2 bucket. It does help though, you can't do like the one for one if he's taking over for Connor, because now the RB2 is also kind of removed. DeMercado is not going to get, he'll play on some passing down stuff, but he's never going to be a guy that's probably going to get like 35% of the touches like Benson was getting. So we're probably going to see him in that 75% like backfield share range, maybe even higher. And this is a team that's throwing to the running backs a little bit. So I think he'll be involved in the pass game. They really only have Trey McBride. And then, man, It's kind of alarming how bad Marvin Harrison is at football. I hope it gets better. They're trying some things.
That drop.
And the second drop too, like with the pass interference, that it was going to be a no play, so it didn't count as a drop. But like, you got to catch that ball. Like,
all right. I mean, he was diving. Like the second one,
still.
The second one I can forgive. The first one was like, the first one felt a lot like a player who has the yips. Like, because that made no sense, especially since that wasn't a concern we had about Marvin Harrison. Like from
those are the harder ones to catch though, when you're mentally in, like when you have something going on, because like you're thinking, he knows he's open on that play, and he's watching that ball come in, and he's thinking about it, right?
Yeah,
but he's just not playing ball right now. It's unfortunate. They're going to have to keep going to him, because like Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch aren't the answer, so we have to ride this thing out. But it was
how dare you not mention Zay Jones? How dare you? Well, see, how about Elijah Higgins though? Like, are we going to get? Let's do 12 personnel. Let's go the whole way through. You're not going to believe this, but I don't know that about catching the football. They didn't throw the football a ton.
Yeah. I just knew when I was in my head, like when I was in my head, or I hadn't been getting targets for like a little bit, because I was a receiver. And like you're thinking about the next target, right? And you're thinking about like what you're going to do with it. You're envisioning what's going to happen, and like you're putting so much emphasis on getting the ball that when it's coming, you're thinking about getting the ball and just not playing. And sometimes that happens, man. Like.
Yeah, no, I didn't. Never a concern. Never. I touched.
But like when you said the second one, which definitely did have a higher degree of difficulty, those are almost the ones you catch more, because you're reacting, you're playing, and like you don't have like that. You're just trying to make a play. But yeah, we're definitely counting on Marvin Harrison to make these plays, and he's not making them right now.
He's just got to make them. On this point, I do want to mention something about Benson, though. I wrote this in the waiver column this week. Because I was talking about the Washington guys, Chris Rodriguez and Jeremy McNichols. And like I had them on the list because like if you need touches, like there they are. But if you're just like adding bench spots, Benson's the kind of guy you want on your bench. And there are a lot of those kind of guys still out there. Like Braylon Allen's out there, and the Jets situation is weird.
Ray Davis has been cut in a lot of leagues.
Ray Davis, Blake Corum, even like you go to like Kendre Miller or DJ Giddens, or he hasn't been very good yet, but like Kyle Monangai, right? Or you can go down the list for a lot of these kinds of guys. And these are the kind of guys you want on your bench rather than like Kareem Hunt, because you know what Kareem Hunt is. And so if I needed somebody to play this week, sure. Like if you're really desperate and you need Kareem Hunt because you're just hoping he falls in the end zone, then you go and add him. But if you're adding bench guys, this is the way. The good thing is, or maybe even the bad thing for my purposes, because I write the waiver column, is we figured this out, I think, as a group. That's why these running backs are not available to
right.
We figured this out as a group. There's a reason that, aside from just being drafted, that Brian Robinson Jr. is not out there in a ton of leagues and all of that stuff. And so, it's changed, but still it's, I think, an important thing to remember with, like I said, some of these names that are available. Ray Davis,
like you said, if you're not using some of these guys too, like they're kind of roster cloggers right now in a sense. Not the guys that you said, because you're playing just for that one angle, but there's a lot of guys I think that are on rosters now a month into the season that I just don't believe need to, like Isaiah Pacheco's a guy. I don't think there's a reason to roster Isaiah Pacheco at this point. I really don't.
Yeah, because he's not even like Hunt. You might get a touchdown. Pacheco, are you getting a touchdown? It's just not there. It's just absolutely not there. And we haven't.
But you're not going to cut him, because you're going to say, all right, well, wait, maybe if they get Rashee Rice back and Worthy comes back and it's the Chiefs offense, and we're going to hold on to this dream that the Chiefs are going to turn back into the Chiefs of 4 years ago. But you're like, a lot of gamers are just gonna be like, I'm not going to cut him. If something happens to Kareem Hunt, but like, this is just a player now that just doesn't have a profile that is that just is strong for fantasy football, even if something were to kind of happen to Kareem Hunt. So it's like, I feel like he's a guy that you're going to look back and just like, I hauled on this guy for nothing all year.
Like, we haven't even got the Brashard Smith, which I do think is something that's going to happen as he gets more involved, as they just absolutely need something, right? And we haven't even seen that happen, and that's something I'm anticipating happening. And so this might even be the best version of Pacheco this year if nothing happens to Kareem Hunt, right? And so it's not ideal. It's absolutely not ideal. I was in a lot of, just because of the way I build teams, I was in a lot of situations where I was looking for just like that. All right, I think this guy is going to get touches in best ball leagues. And there's a lot of Tony Pollard versus Isaiah Pacheco. Which one of those am I taking? And it's so funny that I ended up with Tony Pollard, who you're not excited about at all in this Titans offense, and now Tajay Spears coming back and all of that. But I still somehow made, I think, a better choice with Tony Pollard than Pacheco. And you're like, what a terrible choice I was subjecting myself.
I still remember my write-up in tears for Pacheco. My first sentence was like, I don't know how to handle this player. That was literally my first thing. Like, I was just being honest. Like, as he's a Rorschach test. Like, and I was just like, I don't know how to handle this player in the preseason, like coming into this season. And I didn't get him a lot because of that, but the couple spots I did get him, like I've already just kind of moved on.
Yeah, we're just bailing at this point, unfortunately, because I think we like Pacheco. All right, let's move on and do some game previews. Talk about a few of the biggest games of the week. Before we do that, I do want to make mention of that promo we're running this week, promo code POINTS. So however many points are scored in the Thursday night game, if you're listening to this on Friday, you already know the answer to that question. However many points are scored in the Thursday night game, that will be the percentage you get off at anything over at sharpfootballanalysis.com. So if they score 50 points tonight, you'll get 50% off whatever is available over at sharpfootballanalysis.com. So make sure you go and check that out. Also, if you're listening to this via podcast, make sure you subscribe, whatever podcast listener of choice you use, podcast player of choice you use. If you're watching this on YouTube, we really appreciate it. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube, get notified whenever new videos show up. Obviously, I have a lot of content with, the waivers show, with Warren's recap show, Warren, big, Friday preview show that Rich is on. A lot of stuff out there on the YouTube and in our podcast feed. So make sure you check that out. All right, let's move on to the game previews. As I say every week, if you want a comprehensive player-by-player preview of every single game every week, Rich brings those. We call them the worksheet, his worksheet previews. It's all part of the Sharp Fantasy package. You can use that promo code POINTS to get the Sharp Fantasy package. I highly recommend it. There's no better way to get ready for the week than reading those previews. We're going to go, point by point and talk about some of the more interesting points for the more interesting games, but literally every fantasy relevant player Rich has written something about this week for all 16 games. Make sure you go check it out at sharpfootballanalysis.com. Let's get started with Ravens at the Chiefs. Ravens, 2.5-point favorites in Kansas City. I think you wrote of the worksheet, this is the first time in Patrick Mahomes' career that he's been an underdog in 2 straight home games. We kind of mentioned it last week that, he's an underdog at home. And then unfortunately, producer Adam burst all of our bubbles. But now here we are, underdog 2 weeks in a row. It is something there. I have the total. I looked at it yesterday. It's 48.5. I don't think it's moved too much there. This is a very interesting game. 2 teams that really need a win, right? 2 teams that I still think if we were making like playoff bets, we'd say, yeah, we think both these teams are probably still going to make the playoffs, right? The Ravens for sure, I think are going to make the playoffs in that division, but they really need wins. It's just a very interesting game.
Yeah, I would say in context of the divisions, this is probably more pressing for the Chiefs because the Chargers already have wins against the Broncos and Chiefs now. Like
they have 3, right? They have 3 divisional wins.
Yeah, the Raiders too. So like they've already got 3 divisional wins, but like they've already beaten the 2 teams that we expect to compete. Whereas with this Burrow injury, we still look at the context of the AFC North and we're like, it's still gonna be the Ravens. Like, they could probably even have a down year and go, 9-8 and still win that division.
That's kind of where I am.
So even if they lose this game, and there will be some panic of the Ravens starting 1-3, I still believe they'll be in better shape than the Chiefs will if the Chiefs go to 1-3, just because of the context of the division and where the Chargers already are. And then you've got the Broncos, playing the Bengals this week, and they still have 2 games heads up too. But in general, this is an interesting matchup, probably more so because we're still just trying to figure out what the Chiefs are going to do, right? Like, we are expecting Xavier Worthy to play in some capacity. We have no idea what that means. I know that they labeled him practice in full yesterday, but that could be anything, right? Yeah. We know he's going to play with some kind of harness on his shoulder. He has a torn labrum. So the risk of re-injury based on, and I'm not a doctor, but everyone that I've seen play as a doctor online has said this is a big risk of re-injury.
Plays a doctor. Plays a doctor online is quality. Quality.
That word has been consistent. It's been a consistent take. Like, if this guy lands on this wrong, if he takes a hit, like the bubble could burst at any minute. So is he going to be a decoy? We just don't know. The Chiefs have gone through with this plan of attack that they told us they were going through all season. Like the Chiefs all off season were like, we want to throw the ball down the field more in 2025. We want to push the ball. And they have. Mahomes has his highest depth of target since 2019, his highest rate of throws over 20 yards or football, over 20 yards downfield since 2018. They're trying to push the football. It's just to Tyquan Thornton, who actually has been good. Like, it's not a dunk on Tyquan Thornton. It's just like they don't have he's not Xavier Worthy, right? And they just don't have the pieces. Travis Kelce has not been able to do anything these opening 3 weeks, even with the opportunity share it's been in front of him. Hollywood Brown, it was a good to see the 16 targets in week 1, but he's kind of gone back in the bottle these last 2 games. They just don't have the playmakers on offense. And we just touched on Pacheco. Like, the run game has been a disaster. So what are we going to get out of this offense, right? Is there enough firepower here right now in this game for them to kind of push? We know the Ravens are going to score points. They're going to find a way to score points, but can we get anything out of this Chiefs offense? That's kind of the big deal. And maybe the cure for this is just the injuries, the amount of mounting injuries this Ravens defense has. We haven't seen Jair Alexander play since week 1. Kyle Vanoy has been hurt. Matabuke missed, and he looked like they couldn't stop the run. But, like, are you expecting the Chiefs line up and do what the Lions did on Monday night? Like, no, we're not. So it's just very hard to say, how do the Chiefs like generate points in this game, because the offense has been so bad. They meandered through that entire Giants game. If the Giants got any competent quarterback play in that game on Sunday night, like, that game was there for them to really push the Chiefs. So it's just really, what are we going to get from the Chiefs side? It's really hard to gauge. And for 2 weeks, I wrote up in the worksheet for Mahomes, it's like, hey, I love that he's scrambling and he's taking some onus on himself, saying, I've got to create. But, like, this is not something that's sustainable. And then Sunday night, he doesn't run. And then you see where all that inefficiency was for fantasy football, right? Like, he was covering a lot with those scramble touchdowns that he had in weeks 1 and 2. And it's like, this is not the way it's going to be week to week if you've been starting Mahomes. And, like, I still have questions with him. Like, I don't have him ranked as a QB1 this week. If Worthy playing maybe gets him in the conversation, but I just don't see him as like a locked in, starter in one quarterback leagues right now.
I'm glad you brought up the Van Noy injury, because they had questions about how they were going to rush the passer with Van Noy healthy, right? Like, that was a concern. There's a reason they took the shot on Mike Green when they did, despite obviously the stuff off the field with him as a prospect. And now they don't have him, and, like, the pass rush just isn't there. Like, it doesn't exist. And so, like, that's a major concern, especially, as you said, if they're having issues in the secondary with injuries and stuff like that. And so maybe that's the point here, is that there are enough injuries that the Chiefs can make it happen. We'll see. On Tyquan Thornton, I thought Xavier Worthy was going to play last week, and so I didn't list Tyquan Thornton as an ad, even though anybody who listens to this podcast knows that I've been talking about Tyquan Thornton since, like, beginning of August, right? Like, it just, based on everything they said and what they need. And by the way, the fact that Xavier Worthy was not a deep threat last year, he was not effective in that role last year. And so, like, Tyquan Thornton, I do think fits more in that role. I'm kind of at the point now with Thornton that even if Worthy comes back, especially with the shoulder injury, even when Rice comes back, like, if they really do want to push the ball down the field, he still might be their best option to do that. And so I am interested to see what happens with him. Like, if he can have a Justin Watson-esque role, except he actually gets targets because they're actually throwing the ball down the field. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, and so, like, I am much more bullish on Tyquan Thornton than I was 2 weeks ago, even though Xavier Worthy's coming back, because someone has to do it. Xavier Worthy's hurt. And again, Xavier Worthy, if you dig into the numbers from a downfield perspective, it wasn't really working for him last year. And so we'll have to see kind of, what happens with that. On the other side, if this was a game we were talking about even 3 years ago, we would be concerned, can the Chiefs game script Derrick Henry out of this, right? But now, kind of based on everything you just said, I guess that's not really a concern we have to have anymore when the Ravens come up against the Chiefs, although they kind of did it to them in the playoffs. So it's going to be an interesting situation.
Yeah, they did it last year when they played in that week 1 game, and Spags will dedicate some resources to stopping some of these runners. So it's the same story though. We saw it again last week on Monday night. Like, when Derrick Henry is in a negative game script, like, it's very hard for him to be fantasy relevant because he doesn't catch any passes, and then he's not on the field in these situations where they're dropping back to pass. It's Justice Hill. Since joining the Ravens, he's been on the field for 62% of the offensive snaps when the Ravens are tied or ahead. When trailing, it goes to 46%. When Henry's been on the field, the Ravens have run the ball 61.4% of the time. With him off the field, they've thrown the ball 63.8% of the time, just literally flips. So he's completely dependent on the state of the game. And he's been able to always kind of overcome some of that because, one, the Ravens are good. They're usually ahead. And, honestly, most of those Titans teams were actually ahead too for more than he wasn't until like the latter couple of years. And then he turns in those long runs. He's able to get the explosives for you to kind of cover some of that ground. But he has more fragility than your token RB1 because of game script and his lack of receiving ability. This would be a spot where I still expect him to be involved. I expect this to be a tighter game. I don't expect the Chiefs to like get way ahead in this game. So I do expect him to be involved, but he does come with that fragility. And you've always known that for his career. So I'm more curious about like to see the Lamar angle because he hasn't thrown for multiple passing touchdowns against Steve Spagnuolo defense's very first game against them. This has been a bugaboo matchup for him, but you would say if this is a spot for him to get over, it would line up like this is as vulnerable as the Chiefs are going to look right at this point in the season. So this would be a spot where you look at Lamar and he just keeps getting there, right? Like he hasn't even played really well the last 2 weeks, and you like kind of look up like the 2 weeks ago against the Browns, he had under 5 yards per pass attempt at halftime, and it was like he had a 45% completion rate, and you look up and you're like, oh, he's got 30 fantasy points at the end of the game. Last week he only ran for 13 yards, took a career high 7 sacks, and you look up at the end of the game and you're like, oh, he's got 26 fantasy points. Like
that was I was going to bring that up about Lamar. Some of what the Lions were able to do to him, and like it was situations where you would expect Lamar Jackson to escape, and he just didn't. And I don't know what to read into that, right? Like that could just be like a one-day thing. The Lions could have had a really good plan. Like I don't know what it is, but it was weird watching that game with him not making some of the like escapability plays that we would expect. But there was another play earlier in that game where he stuck his foot in the ground and got upfield, and it was like a flash like we expect from Lamar Jackson. So it probably is nothing, but it was like, am I off base? It was weird to watch some of those sacks, right?
Well, it wasn't an abnormal game because it was a career high sacks he took. So
fair enough. But I was more like it was more like the nature of him not escaping in some situations that you're used to seeing him escape, which was interesting. The other interesting part about that game was obviously we got through going back to the beginning of this episode. We had the 2 weeks of Zay Flowers. They were like, all right, I guess we're in, right? Like we're in on Zay Flowers, and then
again sample size 100% of the time. It was every time.
There we go. I tweeted like Mark Andrews and Zay Flowers neither can live while the other survives. Like, is that where we are with this situation? We might get Isaiah Likely back this week. We obviously saw Bateman get the target, so I don't think we're going to expect that every week. But like after those 2 games, like all right, we're finally here with Zay Flowers. He was like he's getting the same target shares like Jackson Smith and Jigba. We flow right back to the old Zay Flowers. I'm not sure what we're doing with him moving forward.
Probably just similar stuff because again, he's done this before. It was weeks 1 and 2 this year. Like we've had pockets where he's been a legit fantasy wide receiver 1, and we know he has the metrics to be a wide receiver 1 from like an overall target share perspective, a yards per route run perspective. This is an efficient player, but the nature of this passing game over the history of having Lamar Jackson, even the Monken version, is typically only on a per game basis one of these guys gets targeted. So we've had a lot of times where Zay Flowers gets an 8 target game, or then has a 9 target game, and then has a 3 target game. It just happened that they lined up weeks 1 and 2, and then we got the rug pulled in 3. The bummer is it was a good matchup for him, like objectively on paper, like an aggressive man defense that typically spots he's good against. So it was disappointing in that stance. But this is what we have with Zay Flowers. He's still a very good player. I was very hesitant to even ranks last week, move him up to wide receiver 1 status, because I was like, this is still like very much still like a fantasy wide receiver 2. Because again, it's the Zay Flowers stuff or the stuff we talk about. Ladd McConkey is not in much detail, but since joining the Ravens, Zay Flowers has a 14.8% target share in the red zone, and he's got 25% target share outside the red zone. He's just not really involved in like those types of targets, and they've gone to other guys again at the start of this season. It's very weird, some of these players that have it. The most frustrating one is I had the Puka stat in there. I don't know if you like kind of dug into that, because Sean McVay, like at will, like watch me get Puka Nacua the football here. Like everyone knows, like, hey, it's 3rd and 8. We got this big 3rd and 8. Watch me get Puka Nacua the football. And then they get in the red zone. He's like, you know what I'm not going to do? Not going to use Puka Nacua. Like, it's like, wait, doesn't make any sense. Like, it's like,
and it's all Devontae Adams. And actually, that's the next game I wanted to talk about. So it's a Colts at Rams 3.5 point favorite, total 50.5 points, at least when I looked recently. And I guess we could start with that because Devontae Adams was on the injury report on Wednesday. Again, we record this on Thursday morning. We haven't seen it, right? But Devontae Adams has been, as we kind of expected, dominating that work, that touchdown work and the red zone work and all of that stuff. And I do wonder, like, what do we get if that's not there? Can Puka get a larger target share? I'm not sure. Like, are we looking towards Tutu Atwell? Like, how are you kind of looking at the situation if we end up not having Devontae Adams?
Yeah, I would more just wait and see. Again, it's Thursday morning. You know, from the Roto World days, like Wednesday practice reports are
especially for a veteran, the status of Devontae Adams.
right.
Yeah, like he could take some days off. He'll be.
It would be different if he left last week's game with an injury and then opened with but there was nothing. So it could just be like a rest day. Could just be dealing with something. It's maintenance. And they just don't want to push anything. And the Rams are a very progressive team. Like we talked about with the Stafford stuff and why we were buying the dip on Puka when he was going to the 1-2 turn. That the Rams are a team that to have confidence in of like managing player injuries, right? That's why like we never like super panicked on the Stafford thing. Although we said like this isn't ideal, but like we never like, hey, we trust the Rams and how they control injuries. So even if with him missing practice on Wednesday, I would assume that they're doing it's more precautionary, and we'll see him. I listen if it's all Puka Nacua, like can we threaten for the world's highest target share that's ever happened in a game? I think we maybe could get it in this game.
If Devontae Adams is out, I will be 100% Puka. I will just pay whatever costs necessary. We're gonna have 100%.
Oh yeah, on DraftKings it's still crazy. In week 2, I wrote up like and talked about on the DFS show I do with on other sites. I was just like he should be 9K on DraftKings for sure. But and FanDuel's the one site that like we're like, hey, we're seeing enough. Like we're just gonna make him 9K. And it's the one site like that he's not as geared towards. It's like DraftKings. It's like, but right now, like we're in a stage like you literally log on to DraftKings, and if you're a cash game player on DraftKings, you just click Puka Nacua and you just click Christian McCaffrey, and like you worry about the rest afterwards. Like that's just like what you do.
And maybe you hit Jonathan Taylor too, who's on the other side. On the other side
like,
of this.
Yeah, because he should be 9K over there. Just what he's been able to do in terms of getting him the football outside of the red zone, mind you. But it's crazy. He has a 45% target share outside of the red zone. And he's got one red zone target. It is hilarious.
I just have one more note on this game, and it's just so Daniel Jones, huh? That's all I wrote. Like I don't know. Like, is that fair? Like I guess this is real. I guess this is real. I think this is at least a real test for him, right? Which the Broncos were as well. But this one, I am interested to see what he's able to do, because I do think this Rams pass rush is real, and so it's going to be interesting to see what we end up with here with him.
Yeah, absolutely. But I still believe, even big picture, if he fails, like he's a quarterback. I think the rest of the season is someone I would still handle as one of those back end QB1s with upside because of the infrastructure. We've seen Shane Steichen with early career Justin Herbert. We've seen him with Justin Fields. The offensive line is depreciated from where it was 5 years ago, but it's still a very good offensive line. And then their pass catchers 1 through 5 arguably are the best 1 through 5 in the league. Now they're not the best 1-2 in the league, but I think when you get to 5, their 5's a lot better than some 3s on other teams. When you look at,
and we might get some targets for that 5 this week.
Yeah. But yeah, Michael Pittman, Alec Pierce, Josh Downs, Tyler Warren, Adonai Mitchell, like as a group is a group we believe in. So I don't believe this is a situation where he's just going to like turn back into a pumpkin. I do think that he's going to be able to operate this offense. He's got good pass catchers. He's got a good nucleus around him. He comes with a little bit of mobility. It's a team that's in a favorable division. So I think big picture, I'm in on Daniel Jones to this degree. Maybe like he doesn't run as pure as he has these opening 3 weeks, but I do believe he's going to be a QB1, and he's not going to be like this year's Derek Carr.
All right, I want to move on and talk about the Eagles and Bucs before we run out of time. As a reminder, Rich has in-depth thoughts on all of these players in the worksheet previews for every game. Make sure you go and check those out. But I do want to talk about Eagles and Bucs. It's an interesting game. Eagles 3.5-point favorites. It is a low total. Normally we don't talk about these low totals as much on this. Is a fantasy football show that we're talking about fantasy football. But I do think I wanted to talk about it because what we saw from the Eagles offense in that second half, and more importantly, the quotes that we heard from Jalen Hurts and AJ Brown after that game. And I posted one of them, an interview that Jalen Hurts had with Pam Oliver, which was, we need to not, he said specifically, we have to stop playing not to lose. We need to come out and be aggressive at the beginning of the game. Like they were calling out the offensive play calling after the game, after showing what they did in the second half. And, we'll see what happens. They could come right back and kind of be the same team. But hearing both of the stars say, we just need to go out there and do what we did in the second half, that has me feeling really, really good about what we might see moving forward for this offense.
Yeah, and we had talked about it last week. There's just too much collective talent for it to operate in the capacity it was through 8 quarters and then 2 quarters on Sunday. I mean, they had 2 more 3rd and longs in that first half, and they just handed off. They were like, "We're happy to punt here," and it's like, what are we doing? We're like you said, playing not to lose the game. And they come out. He had 17 passing yards, Jalen Hurts, in the first half of that game. I'm like a big DFS group, and I had a buddy that ended up binking, Dean, who works for Roto Grinders. He ended up binking a contest that he had Eagle stack, and he's like, I fell for the banana tailpipe again. I double stacked Jalen Hurts. He is like, this is woe is me. And finally came together in the second half, and it took being down 3 scores for this to happen. They go right down the field too in 4 plays. Hit Goddard on that 33-yard touchdown. You're just like, oh, who knew, right? Who knew? You saw all the tweets, everyone collectively is like, who knew? All the team of all the good players could throw the football. You hope that they come out. I'm very interested though in this matchup because Todd Bowles has been the one guy, he's had Jalen Hurts' number to open his career. He's 1-4 against Todd Bowles. He's completed under 60% of his pass against Todd Bowles, 5 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Todd Bowles has blitzed his face off in all of these matchups. So I'm very curious to see if he remains aggressive in this matchup as well. And they're going to have to create something, the Bucs, because they're just down so bad offensively now. Now Mike Evans is hurt, and then, granted, they might get Chris Godwin back, but what version of Chris Godwin are they getting back this particular week? They're still down 3 offensive linemen. Wirfs is not expected to play. We'll keep the ears to the ground on that and see if he could play. He would be a huge help. But losing Mike Evans now is a big deal. Egbuka was banged up and only played 2/3 of the snaps even in that game. Baker Mayfield is literally going full Wolverine mode in these games. Just, all right, guess I gotta go win this. It's crazy, but they just don't have the pieces right now offensively, I think, to really push an Eagles offense that if they want to do what they did in the second half, they need to do that. Because if you can get this Bucs offense, the state of it is right now, playing from behind, I think that's extremely advantageous. And the other component is the Eagles aren't running the ball well. Well, you know what? One way you can start running the ball well, make some teams have to respect your pass game. So
yeah, make it sort of Saquon isn't just slamming into stacked boxes. That'd probably be a helpful way to do it. Yeah, I obviously we'll see what happens, but those comments really made me feel good.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned Chris Godwin. I do expect him to be back. I also don't think Egbuka was on the injury report on Wednesday, if I'm remembering correctly. So that's a promising sign as well. I mean, you look at all of that. I do think people are going to try to go the Cade Otton route this week after what we saw with Mike Evans out. This is a much different situation especially if Chris Godwin is back and they have Egbuka. This is a much different situation.
And against the Eagles.
And it's the Eagles. Yeah, the Eagles tight end. Yeah, they know what Zach Bond knows what he's doing, right? But the other aspect of that, though, is that this Bucs running game also kind of isn't working either. And so, you're adding that kind of into it as well. We haven't had the Bucky Irving that we want to see, and we haven't really seen, if I'm remembering correctly, the explosive plays we want to see out of Bucky Irving, and which is disappointing after his rookie season. So a lot of moving parts here for this Bucs offense.
Yeah, I mean, you would expect with the state of their offensive line, not to be efficient running the football, and then we also expected, some natural regression for Bucky Irving in terms of how efficient he was last year. But yeah, no explosive plays at all. 10 or more yard run on 5.4% of his carries so far through 3 weeks, 13% as a rookie, so way cut in half. He's 24th in yards before contact per rush. Again, you kind of expect it with the state of the offensive line. He's still getting a massive workload, and we did see with the injuries they had last week, them really start to incorporate more of the screen game that they had a year ago. Grizzard was really trying to throw the ball down the field the first 2 weeks, but the state of the offensive line, they ran a lot more screens and quick stuff. Baker had his quickest time to throw last week to kind of compensate. So I do think Irving will still be involved in the pass game too, especially down Mike Evans now in this game. But they just get the Bucs 3-0 through all of this turmoil, man. You got to feel good at least for them to holding the fort down.
The real concern, and I wanted to pull this up to make sure I got it exactly right. The real concern I have with Irving is he's 48th, not just if we're talking explosive runs, he's 48th out of 55 running backs that fit my kind of filters for qualified running backs in the rate of runs that gain 5 yards or more. So we're not even talking about like explosive runs. We're not talking 10 yards. Like it's just not happening for him. And we know we've seen some of the work that Ryan McChrystal, our own Ryan McChrystal, who's wonderful, by the way, you should read his college football write-ups every week. But we've seen some of the work he's done about how important creating yards before contact is and setting up those long runs. I think that's one of the things that we're losing in the Ashton Genty debate when we're talking about he's not getting more runs over expected or whatever, and we're looking at how many of his runs are coming after contact. Well, it's a lot easier to create yards after contact if that contact comes 2 or 3 yards downfield than it is if that contact comes 1 yard behind the line of scrimmage. And so that's the kind of context we always have to continue to remember with this kind of stuff. So yeah, it's just not set up perfectly for Bucky Irving, but I obviously we still love Bucky. Thank you, Bucky, very much for delivering the most rookie rushing yards for us last year, and we'll hope
we do
for the best.
That.
We will hope
he would still be one of those guys though that like if someone was selling, I'd at least be interested in that RB2, like the disappointing guys. I'd be a lot more interested in Bucky Irving than J&T. I'd be a lot more interested in Bucky Irving than Breece Hall.
You're not even going to bring up Chase Brown's name.
Oh no, Chase Brown is dead, dude. It's dead.
I know. I'm pouring some out.
I have a team with my son that we do like every year, and I wanted to pick up Trey Benson, and he's like, oh, our running backs are good. I'm like, we have Chase Brown. What are you talking about? And we talked about it last week, the Browning experience, and we talked about the schedule being an influence, but I was absolutely floored last week to still see Jamar Chase ranked as the consensus wide receiver 1.
Yep.
And guys like T. Higgins and Chase Brown that couldn't survive at all with the transition.
Yeah, and then they get the Broncos this week, the Lions after that, the Packers after that, the Steelers after that. We'll see if the Steelers are healthy then, right? Like it's not ideal. I do think like Browning in a good matchup, like it could be fine.
Yeah, but that was what we said. Like he'd be overall fine. I was trying to pitch
matchup though.
I was trying to pitch trade targets to Crane for Jamar Chase. Like where was the line like of trading him, because he had the 10 because when I tweeted out the Jamar Chase stuff with Browning, everyone's like, he just had 10 targets from Jake Browning. I was like, cool. Like yeah, like we're like, I care about moving forward.
It's a CD Lamb existence though.
Yes,
like,
yes. And I was like kind of trying to draw the line. And now that immediately depreciated just 1 week later. Like if you're trying to shop him for a high, like, because you could have gotten Jamar Chase, I think, for like a really strong running back and something plus. And that kind of doesn't exist right now, I don't think.
Yeah, at this point, like I think you're just a hold on Chase. Hope he makes a big play. Wait till the schedule gets a little bit easier, and then we'll have a clearer picture on if Burrow's coming back this year, and then we'll see where we are, because it's not the sell window on Chase, I believe has slammed shut. All right, let's talk about our uncut gems. We're going to bring it home as we always do. These are players, just as a reminder, who are available on a lot of waiver wires, or they're on benches and deep leagues that we think can outpace their expectations this week and put up a starting score. I did not have a good one last week. Rich had a great one last week that he stole from me minutes before the show, so I'm taking credit for that one as well. With Marcus Mariota. But
Sam Darnold was also good. I did the
Sam Darnold. Fair enough. Sam Darnold. We'll count those as wins. The other one, I don't know. I might be bringing him up again in this segment. We'll see what happens. But who do you got this week for your uncut gem?
My guy, I purposely didn't bring him up. It was a game that we talked about, but I have AD Mitchell. I would absolutely pick him up ahead of time before this weekend. But I think that the math is typically concussion protocol. Players typically miss 1 week, and then they don't come back.
Especially since Pierce didn't practice on Wednesday, so like he's not advancing in the protocol at this point. Then that's a pretty good indication.
And we have to tap the sign, because we did this a couple times last year too, that when Alec Pierce misses time or Michael Pittman misses time, it is not a bump for Josh Downs. Josh Downs' role is still the Josh Downs role. He is a slot receiver that plays in 11 personnel. He does not play in 1 to 2 wide receiver sets. Since the start of last season, when Alec Pierce has been off the field, Adonai Mitchell has been on the field for 92% of those dropbacks. He's also been targeted on 35% of those routes, the highest rate on the team. He is no longer getting those targets from Anthony Richardson, thankfully. If we want to reduce that sample just to just this year, these 3 weeks, he's been on the field for 95% of the dropbacks. Alec Pierce has been off the field, and he's been targeted on 41% of those routes. The Rams also will be without Ahkello Witherspoon, who's still on IR. And we finally saw that when the Eagles threw the ball, when they got religion in the second half of the game, they had to, the absence of Ahkello Witherspoon was felt in that game. Yep. So on the outside, the Rams are allowing 9.1 yards per target to outside wide receivers. That's 21st in the league. He's going to be a popular DFS play if Alec Pierce is ruled out because of the price point and stuff. But on your season-long stuff, he would be a guy, especially in this game environment, be a guy I would absolutely just be willing to play over a number of guys in like that wide receiver 3 flex area as well. I have kind of ranked him accordingly in that stuff. Like, are you playing Jerry Jeudy like still? Like, I would absolutely play Adonai Mitchell over guys like Jerry Jeudy or Darnell Mooney, his teammate Josh Downs, guys like Hollywood Brown, Christian Kirk, Cooper Kupp, Stephon Diggs, right? Like, I would play AD Mitchell over all those guys.
I don't think Mooney. I think he might go too far with Mooney with the target share we've seen him get. And the
fair enough.
And the fact that Penix said I should throw it to people when they're open, which is mind-blowing idea, Michael. I appreciate it.
So yeah, I love throwing it when guys are not open.
That was the quote, right? Like he's like, I should throw it to them when they're wide open. Yeah,
it was like the Tua quote from a couple weeks ago. We had a good laugh about.
Yeah, great, good stuff. I'm glad you brought up Wicks's target rate per route, because I do think that when you're looking at people getting into the lineup, that's what you should be looking at. So I'm going right back to Dontavian Wicks. I can't quit him. We're going back. Would have liked to see him be on the field more last week, as you wrote in the worksheet. He did pick up that read role, which is not ideal. I do think we see a Matthew Golden breakout this week. So that's also not ideal if you're looking for Dontavian Wicks. But I also think we can get a usable weeks from Wicks here, even if he's just running a route on 70% of the dropbacks, because I expect him to get targets when he runs routes. I expect the Packers to maybe have learned their lesson from last week and actually try to throw. And obviously they're playing Dallas. The Cowboys are allowing 2.71 fantasy points per target to wide receivers. The Dallas pass defense is atrocious. It's an absolute train wreck. I think we get a big play from Golden. I think we get a big play from Wicks. I think we can get a touchdown for Dobbs. I think we can get a touchdown for Kraft. Like, play
everyone gets one.
Play them, like, just play everybody. So I'm definitely back in on Wicks this week. Hopefully we get like a post type sleeper, and we get not a lot of people are on Wicks in DFS, because I will certainly be going back to that as well. I doubt it. I assume people will still be on him, but maybe we'll see. But yeah, I'm not giving up on you yet, Dontavian Wicks. You get one more chance, and then after that, dead to me. You get to go live with all of the other wide receivers who have broken my heart. But one more week.
Yeah, it's a Packers passing game. Smoke them if you got them. Everyone's in play.
All right, that's it for us. We really appreciate you listening. We'll be back again next week, obviously. So make sure you subscribe wherever you're finding us, rather on YouTube or on podcasts, at Spotify, Apple, wherever. Just make sure you subscribe. We really do appreciate it. Also, make sure to check out the points promo. For however many points are scored in the Thursday night game, that's how much you can get off over at sharpfootballanalysis.com. Use promo code points to get that offer. Make sure you check that out. You can check out, using that offer, you can check out Rich's worksheet previews every game, every week of the NFL season, every fantasy relevant player. Make sure you go and read that. And Rich and I will be back to talk with you next week.